In the year 2077, I hope I'm dead. But if I'm not dead, maybe I can live in San Junipero, but instead of being some thirsty lesbian, I'm this sexy frog in an interspecies orgy. And this can be Keanu, whispering in my ear how big his penis is. This game's history and rollout needs no introduction. It was overhyped and released way too early. On top of it being as polished as my ability to hold a conversation, the living and breathing world facade the marketing team shoved down our throats quickly collapsed when you couldn't fuck the girl with one arm you've been following around the same block for 3 hours.
You have nothing better to do?
Thankfully, if you play your cards right, you can have sex with a few girls or guys in this game, and it's pretty fucking horrible to watch. I don't know why developers think it's necessary to put sex in a video game. That's a joke. Of course I know why. Because there's thousands of basement coomers such as myself who love it. Also, speaking of a girl with one arm, I found one and I decided to follow her around to see what her life was like. Where was she born? Is she happy? Will she fuck me? I gathered her name was Konnichiwa, and she was an only child with one arm. But just as I was beginning to break the walls she built for herself, she vaporized into thin air. But that turned out okay, because I met this vending machine who could talk. If you don't pay too much attention, Cyberpunk's world building is pretty good. Well, at least it's okay. The crowds aren't very sophisticated, but there are plenty unique NPCs hobbling around. Don't expect to get too engaged in random events like you would in Red Dead Redemption. But that said, there are plenty of marked activities on your map. It's overwhelming at first, but leaves you with plenty to explore. The missions and quests come in 3 flavors. There's story missions, side jobs, and gigs, and there's also some other stuff. Side jobs have the quality of story missions, containing good context for what you're doing and a good overall story. The gigs and the rest are essentially go to this place and kill people. You can sneak most of the missions, and most areas have multiple entries. The AI aren't geniuses, but there's enough of a challenge if you want to sneak and hack your way through. You'll have an okay time if you like that sort of thing. I prefer to do a little bit of lead pumping myself though, and the gunplay starts off a little dreadful with a poor pistol and an unfair time to kill. But once the world opens up, you can soon start grinding gigs to get some fun weapons. There are tech weapons, power weapons, and smart weapons. Each have their own sort of flavor, but are overall a little bland. Shooting was satisfying, but no gun really blew me away. There's also a melee system, which looks pretty fun, but I didn't dive into it. Obviously, I had to buy the Mantis arms, and those were pretty cool. Being an RPG, there is a tech tree, and there's also augmentations and hacking skills. The augmentations let you rip out your eyes and cut off your limbs, so you can replace them with much cooler versions of eyes and limbs. Separate from this, the tech tree lacks this kind of spice, and many of the options are merely add plus whatever chance to whatever sort of skill. You can buy hacks, and those are pretty cool. You can blind enemies with hacks, detonate grenades in their hands, spread infections, and these can be pretty satisfying when you're in combat, or pretty useful when you're stealthing. The skill tree was the only disappointing element to this. I just wish it gave you more interesting bonuses. The story is overall pretty engaging, but for me, smoking weed all day, it was hard to remember all the names, which is a common sci-fi trope that annoys me, where all the names are obscure and hard to remember, like in Dune. The first few hours left me a little confused on who I was going after or who I was supposed to have sex with, but that said, both the main story and the side jobs take you to a massive variety of locations and offer overall a pretty great experience. The characters aren't awful, and the level of detail in every environment the story takes you to always seems unique. The story has some dark elements similar to Black Mirror. You hear a lot of complaints about how broken Cyberpunk is, but the story is pretty well polished, and now that they've managed to duct tape this game back together, it's beginning to walk on its 2 feet. Almost. Even though the city looks dead at times, the graphics and soundtrack completely immersed me. The game looks truly next gen, and even on medium settings, it still looks phenomenal. And the soundtrack is perfect. It sets an incredible tone for the game and makes you wish vaccines had microchips. Speaking of microchips, there's Keanu and he's stuck in your head. He's definitely a typecast in my opinion, and it was a bad choice. Probably some marketing executive's decision. But even so, he did a good enough job, and having him drop in and out of your head adds an interesting flair to the character's story. Voice acting overall is pretty great.
What happened?
Look around and connect the dots.
Oh, scabs. Shit.
Overall, in my opinion, this game is worth the money now, especially if you're a first-person RPG fan. You're still guaranteed to run into bugs, but the amount has been dramatically reduced since Go Live, and I could look past them. If you like The Witcher and love to shoot things, I really don't think you're going to be disappointed in this one, unless you came here to fuck. 4 stars.